In the damp, shadowed canals of 16th century Venice, the pursuit of beauty began not with a cream, but with a paste. A noblewoman in her palazzo would mix white lead powder with vinegar, stirring until it thickened into a substance called Venetian ceruse. She then smoothed the cool, heavy paste across her face and neck, masking every freckle and blemish beneath a flawless, ghostly mask. The transformation was immediate. Her skin became the prized alabaster of fashion, a living porcelain doll admired in candlelit halls. But the mask never truly dried. Day after day, the lead particles seeped through her pores, entering her bloodstream. At first, the signs were subtle, a persistent metallic taste, headaches that pulsed behind her temples, and a strange fatigue that sleep could not cure. Her skin, beneath the ceruse, grew sallow and thin. The very paste that promised perfection began to corrode the flesh it was meant to adorn, yet she applied it again, layering fresh poison over the damage of the old. Years of this ritual took a brutal toll. The lead accumulated in her bones and soft tissues, attacking her nervous system. Her hands might develop a faint, uncontrollable tremor. Her gums receded, exposing dark lines along her teeth, a hallmark of chronic lead poisoning. The fashionable pallor had become a sickly grey, the smooth mask now cracked over skin that was raw, ulcerated, and forever scarred by the beauty it had once provided. The obsession with a flawless, pale complexion did not fade with the Renaissance. It migrated north from the Venetian canals to the gilded halls of Versailles. By the 18th century, Parisian aristocracy had refined the deadly art. They abandoned the thick ceruse paste for a more delicate powder called blanc de perle, a fine, shimmering dust that promised the luminosity of crushed pearls. Every morning, a courtier would dip a soft brush into a porcelain dish, the air filling with a sweet metallic scent as she dusted the powder across her face, neck, and décolletage. The damage was not immediate, but cumulative. Weeks after adopting the regimen, she might notice a few extra strands of hair on her brush. Then a strange metallic taste appeared, followed by a dull ache in her gums. Her smile began to change. The edges of her teeth grew dark and brittle, slowly crumbling. The lead, absorbed through the skin and inhaled with every application, was attacking her body from the inside, leaching calcium from her bones and teeth and settling into her soft tissues. The final, terrifying stage unfolded in private chambers. The muscle weakness started in her fingers, a slight tremor while holding a teacup. It climbed her arms, making the simple act of lifting a hairpin exhausting. In severe cases, a wrist would drop, limp and useless, a condition physicians called wrist drop. The very powder meant to project an image of effortless grace and health was systematically paralyzing the body it adorned, all while the wearer remained tragically unaware of the source. The obsession with pale skin did not fade with the powdered wigs of Paris. It crossed the channel and evolved. In 19th century London, the fashionable pallor was no longer painted on. It was swallowed. Apothecary shelves held delicate boxes of arsenic wafers marketed as complexion soaps. A woman in her parlour would dissolve one in a glass of water, believing she drank a tonic for clear, translucent skin. The arsenic, a tasteless white powder, entered her bloodstream. At first it seemed to work. Her skin did brighten, flushed capillaries constricting to create that coveted ghostly whiteness. But inside, the poison was binding to enzymes in her cells, disrupting their ability to produce energy. A low, grinding stomach ache began, a constant companion she might mistake for nerves or a delicate constitution. Prolonged, the dosing unravelled her nervous system. Fingers and toes tingled, then grew numb, a creeping peripheral neuropathy. Her muscles weakened. Patches of skin thickened and darkened in grotesque counterpoint to the desired pallor. The fashionable wafer consumed for beauty was systematically destroying the very body it promised to perfect, one silent cellular betrayal at a time. While arsenic wafers promised pallor in London parlours across the Atlantic, a different poison promised to erase another perceived flaw. On a dressing table in a late 19th century American bedroom, a small glass jar of Dr. James P. Campbell's safe arsenic complexion wafers sat among hairbrushes and perfume bottles. Its cheerful label belied the crimson powder inside, mercury sulfide, a compound that would dissolve freckles by dissolving the skin itself. A woman would dampen a cloth, dip it into the jar, and gently rub the vermilion paste over her cheeks and forehead. The mercury ions immediately began their work, binding to proteins in her skin cells and inhibiting the production of melanin. With each application, the faint brown spots faded, but so did the healthy tissue, leaving behind a raw, irritated canvas that felt perpetually sunburned. The damage was not confined to the surface. Absorbed through the skin, the mercury travelled silently into her bloodstream. Her kidneys, tasked with filtering this metallic intruder, bore the brunt of the assault. Tubules within the organs began to scar and fail, a slow internal corrosion that could lead to tremors, profound fatigue, and renal failure, all for the price of a spotless complexion. While mercury and arsenic creams still lined dressing tables, a new and far more sinister element entered the beauty industry. In Berlin's most fashionable salons, jars of radium cream promised what no other product could: true rejuvenation. The cream contained salts of radium, freshly isolated by Marie and Pierre Curie, and marketed not as a poison but as a source of vital, invisible energy. Women smoothed the thick, expensive paste onto their faces and necks before bed. In the darkness of their bedrooms, a faint, eerie luminescence would emanate from their skin, a ghostly green glow they mistook for health. That gentle light was the first visible sign of alpha particles, emitted as the radium atoms within the cream decayed, bombarding the living tissue beneath. The radiation did not heal. It attacked. It shattered the DNA in skin cells, crippling their ability to regenerate. What began as a subtle warmth or tingling sensation soon escalated. The skin, irradiated from within, reddened, then tightened. It became paper-thin, prone to ulcerating sores that refused to heal, leaving behind a landscape of scar tissue far worse than the wrinkles the cream promised to erase. But the promise of radium's glow soon faded, replaced in the 1920s by a different kind of allure. In the flapper-filled dance halls and speakeasies of America, the new obsession was for dark, dramatic eyes. Women reached for a product called Lash Lure, a thick, inky dye sold in tiny glass bottles. It promised lashes so lush they'd look painted on, and it delivered with a horrifying chemical secret. The ritual was intimate and precise. A woman would lean close to her vanity mirror, dipping a fine sable brush into the dark liquid. She'd carefully paint each lash, holding her breath to keep her hands steady. The active ingredient was paraphenylenediamine, a coal tar derivative used to dye fabrics. On skin, it was a potent allergen and a fierce irritant. Within hours, the delicate skin of her eyelids would begin to prickle and burn. The reaction was swift and brutal. Eyelids swelled shut, bubbling with blisters that wept and ulcerated. In severe cases, the corrosive dye trickled into the eyes themselves. It scorched the cornea, the clear window of the eye, leaving behind a milky, opaque scar. For some women, the damage was permanent. They traded a moment of glamour for a lifetime of blindness, their world forever dimmed by the very product meant to make it brighter. The cosmetic industry's next toxic innovation arrived not as a powder or dye, but as a cream promising smooth, hairless skin. In 1932, a young woman named Hazel Faye Brown purchased a small jar of Coremlu from her local drugstore. The label promised effortless hair removal, but the active ingredient was thallium acetate, a heavy metal salt more commonly used as rat poison. Hazel applied the cream to her legs as directed. Within weeks, a deep, burning pain began to radiate from her calves. Her muscles twitched uncontrollably. Then her legs started to fail her. She stumbled, her feet dragging as if weighted with lead. The thallium was attacking her peripheral nerves, severing the communication between her brain and her limbs. Paralyzed and in agony, Hazel Faye Brown filed a lawsuit against the Coremlu company. Her case exposed how the cream's thallium acetate destroyed nerve cells, causing irreversible neurological damage. The landmark trial revealed the company knew of the risks but marketed it anyway, setting a crucial legal precedent for consumer safety against negligent cosmetic manufacturers. While Hazel Faye Brown's case unfolded in courtrooms, another radioactive product was reaching its zenith in American pharmacies. Radithor, a clear tonic in delicate glass ampoules, promised vitality and cured everything from impotence to indigestion. Wealthy businessmen like Eben Byers, a prominent industrialist and socialite, began their mornings by snapping the neck of a vial and swallowing its contents, believing they were drinking liquid health. Inside Byers's body, the radium-226 and radium-228 isotopes behaved not as a tonic, but as a chemical imposter. The body's systems, desperate for calcium to maintain bones, mistakenly absorbed the radium instead. The radioactive particles migrated directly to his skeleton, embedding themselves in the dense jawbone and femur. There they sat, emitting a relentless barrage of alpha particles that shredded the surrounding bone marrow and cells. The damage announced itself not with a sudden illness, but with a persistent toothache. Then his jawbone, weakened from within by the radiation, began to crumble, a condition called osteoradionecrosis. Holes rotted through the bone, and tumours erupted along his spine and skull. By the early 1930s, the once vigorous sportsman was confined to bed, his body consumed by the very substance he had consumed daily for years. The radium glow had faded, but another poison still lingered in dressing tables across the country. For decades, women had smoothed arsenic-laced creams onto their faces each night, chasing the promise of flawless skin. Now, in the sterile light of a 1950s clinic, a dermatologist examined hands that told a different story. The palms were thickened, cracked with deep fissures that refused to heal. The doctor's notes, published in a medical journal, described a constellation of damage. The patient's skin had transformed into a leathery, hyperpigmented map, dark patches scattered across her face and neck like spilled ink. This was arsenical keratosis, a condition where arsenic, absorbed over years, triggered uncontrolled cell growth. The very substance meant to beautify had permanently rewritten her skin's biology. Other case files detailed mercury's legacy: tremors that rattled a cup of tea, a metallic taste that never faded, and kidneys failing under the relentless metal's weight. These were not mysterious ailments. The journals connected them directly to the jars of freckle cream and complexion wafers, finally providing the clinical proof that these fashionable potions were, in fact, slow-acting poisons with signatures written on the body. The medical reports piled up, each one a grim testament to the damage done. But in 1938, the tide finally turned. In Washington, D.C., President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act into law. The new statute gave federal inspectors unprecedented authority. For the first time, they could demand proof that a cosmetic was safe before it ever reached a woman's dressing table. One of those inspectors now walked the concrete floor of a manufacturing plant, his footsteps echoing. He stopped before a production line where bottles of a dark liquid eyelash dye were being filled. He lifted one, examining the label. This was Lash Lure, and under the new law, its formula containing paraphenylene diamine was now explicitly banned. The machine was ordered shut down. The inspector moved to the quality control office where he reviewed the company's new safety protocols. Every ingredient now required documentation. Every batch needed testing. The era where radium could be sold as a skin tonic or thallium as a hair remover was legally over. The Act established that cosmetics must not contain poisonous substances, creating the first enforceable safety standards that protected consumers from the very poisons that had once defined beauty.